map is that it'll allow us to gather data that we haven't been able to gather on our own just because there's so much data out there. So what we did is we went back to 2008 and we tried to find all the instances where a local news organization had either closed or scaled back service or something new had been launched. And so we populated the map with as much as possible with information that we could find. But obviously there's lots and lots of other information out there that's happened since 2008, and there's probably lots of stuff going on right now that we don't know about. So the idea of the crowdsourcing is that it'll allow us to obviously draw upon the expertise and knowledge of the local news landscape of people who live in communities, and they'll be able to contribute those pieces of information to the map to make it more robust and interesting and more comprehensive. There's a number of ways for people to get involved. I mean, first of all, when they add a piece of data, they can comment, or they can comment on any other developments on the map that they want. And we've also incorporated a survey so that people can fill out the survey and tell us a little bit about where they go for their local news, whether they feel adequately informed about various topics ranging from politics to education to other local issues, and on. And the map is a powerful visualization tool that's going to draw upon the crowd, but also present the information at a glance that'll tell us what's going on. So the fact that you can sort and filter the map to just look at what's going on with newspapers, what's going on with daily newspapers, what's going on with the public broadcaster on the television side.
Period of really the last 8 months we've been developing this map. It's been an awful lot more complicated than we had originally intended, precisely because there is so much activity and there's so much difference in this type of activity across Canada. For example, we have 4 major types of media. We have newspaper, we have radio, we have TV, and we have the web. And then within each one of those different types, we have a whole series of other different information that we need to convey. So, for example, with newspapers, we have free daily newspapers, we have community newspapers, we have newspapers that people pay for. And then, to take the complexity one step further, we have new newspapers, we have like increasing frequency of papers, decreasing frequency, we've got some newspapers closed, and so we see all of this sort of like compounding levels of complexity around the data that we need to present. Because of course one of the problems with maps is that maps to present information in an effective way require an awful lot of thought around the types of information that you present and how you actually present that information. It needs to be beautiful, it needs to be engaging, but it also needs to be informative. We use color, we use typography, so we use all these different aspects to try and make that data as accessible as possible, but it's still a challenge. And so with the news poverty map as well, another factor which makes it even more complicated is that we also have we also have the issue of time. We've tried to create a map that displays transformation. It displays change from January 2008 right through to the present. And because it's a dynamic and interactive map, and it's largely in the future going to be based around crowdsourcing, that time factor will continue to be important into the future. So you can see that really, we had all these challenges that we don't often have in more sort of straightforward types of crowdsourcing type projects, because we're working with such complex data. You're initially faced with a map of Canada, and on that map of Canada we have a series of both clusters as well as individual map markers which represent the changes that have taken place in Canadian media over the period of the last 8 years. Generally speaking, we try to make the data as uncomplicated initially as possible, but the user has all sorts of options to look at the full breadth of the database. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to click on the unclustering or ungroup markers button, and then what we see is the full extent of all of the different map markers actually represented on the map. So I think, as I said earlier, there's close to maybe 200 plus different map markers, and then when we uncluster them, we can see the sort of full extent of that. And then one of the things which is unique to this particular map is in the bottom we actually have a timeline. the timeline becomes a tool if we hover over it to see where we see sort of like, spikes of activity occurring in regards to change in media. And what you can do is you can click on any one of these particular bars on the bar chart, and the map will filter itself to show specifically that data on the basis of time. And there is an interesting sort of geography that occurs there. And then you reset the map just simply clicking the reset button up at the top. And then we move to the legend on the left-hand side. The legend is essentially has a short description about the particular markers in that particular field, and you can turn layers on and off. And this is a great way at the sort of upper level. Say, for example, if you're only interested in looking at internet or online news, you can turn the other layers off, and the map will refilter itself and get rid of those. So it helps us to sort of look at the sort of broader level, issues that we're interested in. And then one of the important things we've done is we've got these 3 drop-down tabs at the top. These drop-down tabs, if you hit them, they basically give us ways to actually be able to filter the map relatively quickly. So the first one, view changes by ownership. For example, we can look at Black Press, or we can look at CanWest. If you look at the tabs at the very top, just underneath the search bar, and you open them up, you have a whole series of different tags which relate to specific, in this case, owners of media. You can click on any one of those tags, and once again, the map will filter itself just to show us just that information. We have the actual changes by event that take place. There might be a decrease in service, something might be closed, it might be new, and once again, these act as ways of filtering information, and the same with view changes by media. We also have a search bar there, and we can search both the database, but also we can search geographically coded data from the Google Maps API as well. Say, for example, I might be interested in just seeing examples of media changes in Calgary. I can just type in Calgary into the search bar, zoom into that area. Users can either log in as administrators, or they can sign in using their Facebook credentials, and they have the actual opportunity to be able to add information to that map as well. And so we'll be able to continue in the future to crowdsource information.
So those were sort of where I started thinking about the challenges of local news in these communities and how well people are being served. And then in the United States, they've actually been concerned about this for some time because they've had really serious waves of closures of major daily newspapers across the country, among other things. And there's been some quite interesting research looking at what scholars have called the critical information needs of communities. And they've identified a list of things that they think communities need as much as they need clean water and well-functioning hospitals and roads that you can drive on. And they've included these critical information needs as being part of that. So some of the things on the list are information about education, about health, about security, about what's going on in an emergency. They've created this list of what they call critical information needs, and that sort of gave me a way of thinking about measuring this, how well Canadian communities are being served in these regards. Because right now we actually don't have very much research at all in Canada